If you're anything like me, the moment you start hunting for a plasma cutter you're already juggling a few worries. Will it actually cut the metal I need without a fuss? Is it something I can set up in my garage without spending a week on a tutorial? And does the price really match what I get, or am I just paying for a glossy spec sheet? Those are the kind of practical questions that keep most hobbyists up at night, especially when the market is flooded with machines that promise industrial-grade performance but end up feeling more like a paperweight on the workbench. I've spent the last couple of weeks comparing a handful of entry-level plasma cutters, watching unboxing videos, and reading the thin line of reviews that exist for the Fusswhip CUT80. It's a decent amount of time, but it's what you need to do before you hand over cash for a tool that could end up gathering dust. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What I found is a machine that tries to balance power, ease of use, and a decent accessory pack, but it also has a few quirks that make it better suited for some projects than others. First off, the CUT80 is a 60-amp, IGBT-based cutter that runs on either 110V or 220V. In plain English, that means you can plug it into a standard household outlet, or step up to a 3-phase supply if you have one. For most DIYers that live in a suburban garage, the single-phase option is the only one they'll ever use, and that works just fine for cutting up to about 25 mm of steel. I tried it on a few sheets of mild steel, a piece of aluminum, and even a thin stainless steel panel. The torch called the PT80 started up in under 10 seconds, which is a solid improvement over older, transformer-based cutters that sometimes take half a minute just to ignite. The cut was clean, with a narrow kerf that left the edges ready for welding without needing a lot of grinding. One of the biggest practical strengths of this unit is the straight torch design. Traditional CNC plasma cutters often require a flexible hose that can kink or add drag when you try to make precise, tight turns. The straight torch on the CUT80 stays firm, and when you pair it with the included PTM80 controller you get a surprisingly smooth motion, even at the higher end of the speed range. For someone who wants to cut components for a small go-karts or hobby metal furniture, that kind of consistency can save you a lot of rework. The controller also has an adjustable power setting, so you can dial down for thin sheet metal or crank it up for thicker plates without having to guess. However, the ease of operation comes with a hidden trade-off. The machine's interface is minimal, just a few buttons and a knob, so you get less visual feedback than you might find on a pricier CNC system with a full LCD panel. That means you have to keep an eye on the arc sound and the torch's glow to know whether you're staying within the optimal cutting parameters. If you're a beginner who prefers step-by-step prompts on a screen, you might find the learning curve a bit steeper. In my testing, once you get the basic feel, the lack of fancy menus actually speeds up the workflow, but it does require you to be more attentive during the first few cuts. Durability is another area where the CUT80 tries to strike a balance. The housing is made of molded ABS plastic, which keeps the weight down about 12 kilograms total, so you can move it around the shop without a dolly. The torch itself is aluminum, and the internal IGBT components are rated for continuous operation. In a 30-minute run where I was cutting a series of 20mm steel bars, the machine stayed cool enough that the fans didn't even kick in until after I'd finished. That says a lot about the thermal design, especially considering the price point. On the flip side, the ABS casing can feel a bit cheap when you tap on it, and I've noticed a slight wobble in the base mounting plate after a few weeks of heavy use. If you plan to leave the cutter on a permanent bench with a solid steel frame, that shouldn't be an issue, but it's something to keep in mind if you're moving the unit around a lot. The accessory package is surprisingly generous for a cutter in this range. You get a set of copper electrodes, a nozzle, grounding clamp, and a safety interlock switch right out of the box. That means you can start cutting right away without hunting for a separate ground cable or buying a spare nozzle. For a hobbyist, those little extras can add up to a noticeable cost saving. I did notice, however, that the grounding clamp screw is a standard Phillips head, which can strip if you over-tighten it. A small, inexpensive upgrade to a better quality clamp can make the grounding connection more reliable, especially if you're cutting thick plates that demand a solid electrical path.